I am a huge Evil Dead fan, and while the movies were out before my time, I still got the luxury of watching them at a pretty young age. And I really enjoyed that first movie, especially considering it was stacked up against some of the most iconic horror movies of all time being released around the same moment. It was sort of like a take on what would happen if The Exorcist was happening amongst a group of friends. Very foolish friends, but cannon fodder all the same. But when it comes to the sequels of Evil Dead, I personally wasn't a huge fan of their more lighthearted and comedic nature. The series just became a little bit too campy for my liking, but when they started to reboot / continue the series in 2013, I was hooked yet again. Both 2013 and its sequel Rise were very solid films, with Rise taking everything the 2013 film did well and amplifying it even more. And with the new movie Burn, it's only solidifying the fact that each film is getting better with each new installment, at least in my opinion. And while Evil Dead Burn's not perfect, and it definitely lacks in the character / charisma department, it's still cinematically one of the coolest and most creative Evil Deads we've had so far. There were so many dope one-shots and set pieces that I was actually getting some goosebumps for how amazing they all were. There were also a lot of homages to the old films, like a glimpse of Ash with the family's grandma, maybe indicating that he's related to all of the Prices, or like a scene with Alice reading 3 of the 4 cursed words before realizing it's probably a bad idea to do. Which, seriously, I'm glad a character finally decided to do this. I've been waiting for it. Even when rewatching the series, it still pisses me off to see the dweebs from the previous installments choose to read those words and cause all the mayhem we see. Still, despite being able to save herself from 2 Deadite invasions, Alice still got chomped on by Cujo here. Which, side note, that dinner scene with Cujo was not okay. But it was pretty brutal, and that's one thing this film does pretty spectacularly, is amp up the brutality more than we've seen in any other installment of the franchise. This film going especially hard on its fight and chase sequences made it a pretty intense film to watch. And honestly, from what I can see online a little bit, was the reason a few people didn't really enjoy it altogether, claiming it just was a little bit too gory for them. Which there's definitely going to be some spoilers in this video, so if you don't want any, definitely check out now. It's definitely one of the most brutal Evil Deads we've had so far, honestly, from start to finish. Like with the opening kill and the guy getting fishing line wrapped around his face, hooking into both his eye and his mouth before he's dragged into the water, or the following kill where his friend goes out on a boat to find him, only to see Jessica here from Evil Dead Rise poking her head out of the water like the hag from Widow's Bay. His fate wasn't much better because he gets tossed aside into the water and boils alive like a crab. We get this really gross scene where he crawls onto the shore and his face and hands are all melted, and the Jessica Deadite walks through and steps on his melting hand, squishing it like mud. Leaving a fleshy, melty footprint on someone's hand at the opening to a horror movie is a pretty solid way to start it. And after the film takes its time introducing the rest of the characters and the family, the dad himself gets infected and becomes the ultimate brute force to be reckoned with. For example, when the dad originally goes full berserk in the car as they're trying to take him to the hospital, he ends up punching Tiny Tina here, but with keys inside of his fist. And it felt like literally a dozen times before the boyfriend Joseph finally stepped in to help out. And even then, Joseph couldn't do much as he's lifted all over the vehicle, even outside of the sunroof. At some point, the dad was just straight up strangling Tina, and Joseph has a gun aimed right at his head, yet Joseph's too much of a coward, and his girl has to try to save herself, resulting in Joseph bailing on her and fleeing out of the vehicle as she literally gets stabbed with the headrest of a car seat. And her head wasn't made of paper plate material like all the zombies on The Walking Dead. No, in this, the dad ended up taking quite a few shots to finally be able to stab her with it. I honestly felt so bad for this character, I almost forgot it was an Evil Dead film. Still, I'm happy Joseph stuck around long enough to view the whole act, because he definitely deserves the guilt of all this. He may have not started the whole Deadite fiasco, but he was sure ready to watch his girlfriend die. And I'm glad she also didn't let it go when she became a Deadite, mocking him later for leaving her behind and also willing to kill her over everybody else. Either way, while Joseph made his way back to the house, she ended up becoming a Deadite pretty quickly and was hot on his tail. Arriving at the house right behind him and leading into the scene we see of the trailers, which was honestly one of the more iconic scenes of the movie for sure. This entire sequence in film was way more intense, with the music slowly building up as she removes the head seat from her head. We then just get an abrupt start to an all-out brawl as Tiny Tina here takes out all 3 of the family members by herself. And we could see just how much the cast and crew paid attention to the tinier details here. When it comes to a Deadite, they're abnormally strong, and Tina definitely proves that here. Like at one point, while she's holding the mom down and fending off Joseph, she's able to reach behind herself and yank Alice onto the ground with a single hand behind her back. And even when the family are finally able to toss her down the stairs, she scorpions and is still kicking. And I also really like how clever the Deadites were in this film, with Tina immediately heating up the boiler while the dad meets them outside and taunts them with psychological warfare, telling Joseph it should have been him who died instead of the son who died in the beginning of the film. And to make matters worse and prove how impossible it would be to fight these guys, he takes the gun and blasts his own brains 3 different times. It was at this point I'd pull a Joseph and run without looking back. I was really curious how the Deadites were gonna mess with Granny here, considering her memory was already all over the place. And while they did definitely toy with her cognitive decline just a little bit, it turns out Granny here was honestly the funniest part of the entire movie, and genuinely one of the most charismatic Deadites we got in the whole film. Either way, once Tina breaks free, we get a really dope dishwasher scene with both her and Joseph, with the silverware stabbing into his back as he stabs Tina in the neck. And then we continue the long tradition of really gross neck scenes within this franchise, as Tina takes the side of the stabbing and moves it to the front of her neck without breaking contact. It was disgusting. We then get a really cool shot of Tina going up the stairs as she glides her fingerless hand across the railing, leaving a blood trail. Turns out the Deadites are seeking information from Grandma here, but since her mind's kind of broken, they just have to infect her to get it. And I was really wondering what Tina was going to do to infect her here and how brutal it was going to be. Only it was actually really disgusting because she just took out her dentures and sucked on them before putting them back. Either way, Joseph and Alice are able to tag team and take her out after Joseph's able to turn her head into a pile of mashed potatoes, thankfully resulting in the last bit of head trauma Tiny Tina here is going to take throughout the film. Only Joseph's going to regret that, because later his dad's going to take Joseph's face and shove it into the dead mush that was his girlfriend's face, which was honestly grosser than the moment when the dad got inside and he made out with the mom. I was really rooting for the mom to be sort of the more heroic of the family, but after all the events, her mind just sort of broke. Either way, after the dad is done shoving Joseph's face into his girlfriend's face, it leads into an all-out brawl that was actually one of the first teaser trailers we got for the film. A beautiful one-shot as we see the dad just wreaking havoc around the home as Alice crawls around in panic. It was cool how people were flying all around from so many different directions that it was hard to believe it was coming from a single Deadite. There was even a really cool moment and homage to the previous films with the dad in the background gliding across the floor. Alice crawls into a closet for safety as she hears everybody else getting severely fucked up outside. That is until Joseph's head just gets slammed through the door and we see him doing at least one noble thing and not outing her hiding spot before he's pulled off screen and inevitably killed. And while Alice does try to escape, she ends up getting into a scuffle and the grandma holds her face down against the saw blades as she takes a pen and slowly stabs it into the side of her ear. And despite being able to save herself, she was unable to save her ear as when she's trying to pull the pen out, it snaps in half, leaving a piece stuck inside. Thankfully, she heads to the bathroom to try to pull them out, but she brings the mom with her. Which at this point, the mom was not only infected, but also still helping out the Deadites either way, despite getting tossed around and brutalized by them herself. In the bathroom, we actually get a really cool scene as the mom slowly transforms from someone who's going through some of the symptoms and is a little bit aggressive to full Deadite mode, with the camera zooming in on her eye as it slowly shifts color. They get into a scuffle, and there's this really amazing shot where the mom wraps Alice's head in a bag and crawls backwards, only she crawls backwards and up the side of the tub until she's on the ceiling hanging Alice from above. Alice is thankfully able to escape and she makes her way to the attic where she frantically searches for the correct medieval dagger that is surprisingly amongst all the rest, considering how important it should be. She finds the one that works and is able to stab Joseph, who gets about 3 seconds of Deadite screen time before he's officially killed off. Which was honestly pretty disappointing, because his character not only seemed the most interested in the lore of the Deadites and his family history, but I definitely wanted to see more of him as well than just kind of being a coward and not really doing anything successfully for the whole film. Bro literally spent the entire movie getting absolutely demolished by his family, both psychologically and physically. Either way, it still proved the dagger Alice found worked, though it wasn't the most intimidating looking knife. And I personally found, after making her escape and burning down the house, the movie sorta dropped in its tension a little bit. Maybe it's because I just wasn't too invested in Alice as a character and her relationship with one of the sons seemed too toxic for me to actually care about. But I personally would have preferred if the emotional pull of the film was more focused around the family itself. Not that there wasn't some emotional focus, but all of the narrative focus being on Alice just didn't really do it for me. As opposed to characters like Beth from Evil Dead Rise, who had a really awesome relationship with the rest of her family, or even Mia from the 2013 film, who had a pretty tension-filled relationship with her brother. And while I referenced this earlier, while I did really enjoy the Deadites' brutality throughout the film, I didn't enjoy the lack of charisma a lot of Deadites usually have. Don't get me wrong, Tina was very charismatic and did a fantastic job, but I think out of all the Deadites we got, the grandma was the best one. Not only did she look the creepiest, but she also was the funniest. The father's actor did a great job as a dad in grief and slowly turning into one with the infection process. But while he was a brute force as a Deadeye, we just didn't get too much personality from him, with the mom and Joseph getting even less time as a Deadeye to really shine. Still, the visuals, the sound design, and the absolutely amazing set pieces made this film one of the best in the franchise for me personally. The one-take shots, the mirror flips, or that really dope bathroom crawl scene all made this film a standout amongst the rest. But I want to know what you guys think. Was the gore just a little bit too much? Where could the franchise be going in its next installment, Evil Dead Wrath? And if you enjoyed the video, liking and commenting really helps. I cover a lot of horror and mystery shows, but I also cover a lot of sci-fi, with the recent Avengers vs. Dune video, as they're both coming out on the same day. Either way, stay safe out there, treat your family right, and don't read from the Book of the Dead.